this shirt that oh, never mind, we're online.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. We're using StreamYard, so it's quite possible that we have people who are joining us this afternoon or this morning, I'm sorry, and we may not be able to see you. So in order for us not to miss anyone, please leave us a comment and let us know how you are feeling today. Friend, how are you feeling? What says it all?
The best way to describe how I'm feeling is like I'm in a haze and I'm very in and out. It's scary, actually. Like sometimes I feel fine, not fine, but like, okay, we've done this before.
Moving forward.
And then other times I'm like very dark.
Yeah.
And I've been forgetting a lot of things, which is scary to me.
Like brain fog or like fatigue?
Like brain, I don't know what, yeah, I don't know. Like I've just like I forgot I had a big meeting on Friday, which is very unlike me, and I forgot one of my kids had a play date yesterday. Just stuff that I shouldn't forget. What about you?
But I think we also have to be gentle with ourselves, and I keep saying that. And I think there are other times that we say it and we're like, oh, be kind to yourself, in a very like social media graphic way. But now is the time that we have to mean that in its realest form, because we just can't keep acting like the world is normal and it's not.
Yeah, I also just feel so embarrassed.
What do you mean by that?
Like, so, like I just embarrassed for our country, embarrassed for what's to come, embarrassed that, like white women and a lot of men didn't vote for like the well-being of the country.
Yeah, I feel you.
And
that's hard.
but to your point about being gentle, I was saying to my husband this morning, like he's like, how are you feeling today? And I'm like, I am sad. And being sad is an appropriate response to what has happened.
Amen. Let me just say this too. I heard someone say, and there's been obviously a lot of chatter on social media, and we've kind of dipped in and dipped out, but there are a number of things that are just burning my biscuits right now. And someone has made the comment, or people are making the comment, well, what did you expect? Well, you thought that one vote was going to change the world. You should have known that this was going to happen. And I think that is the most fatalistic, ridiculous thing I've ever heard anyone say. Because what it sounds to me like is that we should all be complacent in our oppression. We should be okay with it. And so the second I stop having feelings, second I stop being disappointed, the second I stop crying, I'm about to throw in the towel, because what am I fighting for if I'm not emotional at the state of the world right now? So we have every right to feel a way, no matter what we knew about this country before the election. I have gone back and forth like you, friend. Like every day is a different emotion. The day after, it felt kind of somber. Like I didn't have any words, and all I did was cook and clean. And I felt myself kind of doing what I could control, because I was like, why am I in this manic state of cleaning and meal prepping? Oh, this is what I can control right now. And then the next day, when Kamala gave her concession speech, I just laid in my partner's arms and I cried and cried and cried, because I thought to myself, if this woman, whether or not I have always believed in who she would be as a president, right? I knew she was going to be better than Trump, though, is at the Mecca, is what we call Howard. So the most elite HBCU. She pledged the first Black sorority, the first chapter on that campus. It's the light skin privilege, the straight hair privilege, prosecutor. She's done all the things. And if she's still not good enough, how terrifying must this be? And then after that, I got angry. And today, I think I feel ready to fight. And it probably, like you, will continue to ebb and to flow. Gigi, good morning. Sunny, good morning. Tamira, good morning. Please share with us how you all are feeling as well. We would love to know. But we have a lot to unpack today, right?
We do.
Friend.
TA says, good morning. I'm very fearful of the future, but trying to stay calm. Yeah. So I've been thinking, thank you for that. I've been thinking a lot about the role of fear and the role of hope and the role of anger and sadness and kind of all of those things, because we can feel all of them within a given day or hour or minute or whatever. And
True.
when I feel like I have like different things I think about when I think about when I have each of those feelings. But the one that like stands the strongest in my heart is that I'm not willing to let this man and the people that he appoints ruin the next 4 years of our lives.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's and maybe that's naive of me. But it's like I don't know. I don't know the ages of people who are on this Zoom. I mean, on this live. But last night I had a conversation with my mom, who is distraught too. But she was like, "I might not even have 4 good years left."
Yeah.
And I'm sure, like that's another way of just like framing it. That I don't know.
It reminds me of something though that I know that we're going to get into, which is how we define movement in a movement building time. And while 4 years and that kind of increment of change is important because of what the electoral process looks like in this country, right? 2 or 4, sometimes yearly, depending on the local election. I think we have to remember that the other side is organizing for generations, for generational change. And they're making gains upon sometimes a 50-year agenda. And we're just trying to get by to the next election. And I think this election told us that that's just not good enough. And if we want to win the war, we have to see this as a battle. And this battle was lost. But we have to have a stronger war building strategy. And I hate to use a violent analogy, but sometimes you lose the battle to win the war. And we have to think about our gains and what we are fighting for much, much long term. So let's talk a bit about the election, friend, because there are a lot of opinions about how the hell we got here again. And why? Why do you think the majority of Americans, girl? An easy question to start us off with, Margo. Break down from your political science worldview. How did we get here? How did we get here, as Deborah Cox once said?
So I think, well, I think two things. I think people voted because their groceries are more expensive and blame Biden and Kamala for that. I think they voted based on fear of other, especially fear of immigrants and fear of trans children, which I think is such a fucking red herring.
Yeah.
I think there were strong sub-coalitions of people who want a better world, especially related to food sources and the environment, that see the Democrats as just another part of the problem.
I agree.
And I think a lot of people didn't vote because of Gaza. So those are I think fear. I also think, and we've talked about this a lot, and I want your opinion on this, that you don't have to be a man to uphold the patriarchy.
Shundo.
And so the issue of reproductive justice and bodily autonomy and freedom, I just think a lot of women don't care. And I am a little bit at a loss about what to make of that. But we can talk about that, and I'm sure we will continue to talk about that. What about you, friend?
Yeah, and you all know that this is just one of many episodes, I'm sure, on this topic and strategies moving forward, because we can't. More information is developing, as our producer told us earlier. All the votes have not been counted in California, and so we don't know. It looks like Republicans are going to win the House, but it hasn't actually been called yet. So more information is coming, and we will be sure to continue to tap into these conversations. But I agree with everything you said, friend. I think the first thing that I know you agree with, that we all know in here today and can go without saying, is just misogynoir. And what it would mean for this country to have a Black woman president is just really, it goes against the core of how this very country and this so-called democracy was founded. And so I think for us to get to that point, take something different than the hope that Obama gave us. And the Dems' messaging this time around it seemed to have been, Trump is bad and I need my abortions. And it just, as you said, did not land for a number of reasons, because I do believe that people's economic reality was number one for them. So much so that for white women especially, it made them vote Trump over their own interests regarding reproductive justice and bodily autonomy. I think, as we discussed early on, friend, Biden should never have run. And we're not saying that because of a personal vendetta against Joe Biden, obviously, but he himself said that he was not going to run. And so strategically, when it comes down to the amount of time that Kamala had, I think that didn't work in the Democrats' favor. And last thing, I want to agree with you about Gaza. I think the underperformance around for young people, either getting them out to vote or seeing a larger majority of them or a larger number of them compared to Joe Biden vote for Donald Trump, was largely because of economic issues and because of Gaza. And I think the Dems have lost. They've become the party of the intellectual elites. And I don't know how or when that happened, but that's where we are. And my sister screenshotted, and I shared this with you, Em, what she was seeing coming down her timeline from Black men, and it was astonishing. And so working class, poor and working class people in this country, even those who come from communities of color, are just not seeing their interests being met by the Democrats. And so I would say Houston, they got a problem, but Nancy Pelosi said they don't.
So can I add something? Because it's a little bit of a counterbalance to, like, if you don't have hope or you don't have anything to fight for, like, what's the point? So I'm just going to preface it with that. But like, do we really think a Black woman could win?
Yeah.
And if we did we actually poll how people were going to vote? And to your point, like, these people who put in their time, this is not a criticism of Kamala at all. This is a criticism of the institutionalization of how the Democrats push people up or push people down, right? That we actually don't know, or we do know, but we're not running people who are resonating with young voters. We're not running people who are working class.
Talk about it.
We are not running people who didn't go to college.
And we have, go ahead.
No, sorry, go.
I was going to say, we have examples of when we do that, what happens. And I think about someone like AOC, who was a waitress. So we have examples of people who are able to, I call it being in the pocket. And sometimes to a much, much, much smaller degree, I feel this with my social media community or my online community. I'm like, oh, I'm in my pocket right now. Like I'm able to feel their pulse. I am their reflection. They are mine in this moment. And instead, we have Nancy Pelosi. And there is something about the old guard Democrats and the message that is just not reigning true. And I can get into the whole two-party system rant a little bit later, but right now, just talking about how the Democrats got here, it is not landing. So I want to read some of the comments, friend. Let's see. Someone talked about Joanne Reed. I thought that was interesting. Joanne Reed went over the numbers during the Win with Black Women call. Trump overperformed with his voters, and Harris either stayed the same in some states or some of the Biden 2020 voters stayed home. I would argue also that based upon the exit polls in some jurisdictions, she also lost some of Biden's votes. But yes, that makes sense. Any other comments to lift?
So someone, an interesting and upsetting comment, but I think we should highlight it, is people were saying, why a Black woman first instead of a white woman?
But it's interesting though, because arguably, was there something you think, friend, that could have been learned from Hillary's loss to Donald Trump that Democrats did not put into motion this time around?
Well, I think everything that you said, like, misogynoir is such a strong motivator for so much of the voting block. And remember, we're not talking about a popular vote. So
In Hillary's case.
well, no, I'm just saying for the president, we're talking about electoral,
Oh, I see what you're saying.
right, we're talking about an electoral vote. So we're not actually talking about a popular vote. And I don't know. I'm kind of at a loss about this because um I'm just so angry, and the messaging that we've been like given or like are told to believe is just bullshit. Like,
What do you
actually,
mean?
we can't do anything.
Mm, mm,
Actually, like, you do get to be a convicted felon and be president of the United States.
mhm.
But like, actually, if you were a convicted felon, you couldn't vote. So like none of that makes sense. So us trying to make sense of it actually I think is part of the problem. Like, people voted not in their self-interest, and our party has a problem. I think.
Yeah. And the
Or
interesting part too is that in some states who had a down ballot on their down ticket, so like local elections or federal, like congressional seats on their ballot, in some cases they voted Democrat, but then they still voted for Trump for the president. So yes, there's something. One of these things does not match the other, is what I'm
well,
trying
it's also
to
like
say.
so there I've been reading all or been trying to understand a lot of the agenda around tariffs and the potential impacts, because like Donald Trump says he's going to raise tariffs, and what would that mean, and how does that impact his relationship with Jeff Bezos, and what all of these things I keep thinking about.
Yeah,
And it's like, right, Margo, like a lot of people don't even understand what tariffs are.
yeah.
So people are just not voting in a way that makes a lot of sense, and us trying to make sense of it outside of what you're saying, which is what's our strategy? What would resonate, I think is a waste of time.
And Kim said something that I think is really true. And this is why poor people of color, especially, I'm thinking about Latinx men and Black men, are really gung ho Trump, some of them. Based upon the polling data, they say people like to see themselves in their candidate and Kamala's policies. Wait, hold up. People like to see themselves in their candidate. They want to believe that someone who has made so many mistakes in their life can have the highest power in this country. And also, I think they like to think of themselves as the possibility of being rich and being rich white men in that. And there's something to be said about that. I heard people say things like, Black men, we need a tough candidate. We need a gangster as a president. This idea that Trump advanced representing these alpha men in some way also advances their interests.
Also, to that point, right? Like, apparently a lot of women want that too. So we're going to be taken care of whether we want it or not. He made that really clear.
Yeah.
And men don't want, and I mean, like, men don't want women that want something else, and apparently women don't either. White
Absolutely.
women, sorry. White women, the majority.
Well, this goes to Tamara's point. Tamara said, I think we need to unpack self-interest a bit more. I think people did vote in their self-interest, just not what we perceive as their self-interest. We all live with duality. Very true, Tamara.
Yeah.
Very true. Very true. So let's get into some of the data a bit. I mean, you all already know it. We have talked about it a bit. But what I found most interesting, friend, is I listened yesterday. I don't know if you heard it, but it was being kind of teased on the news all last week. Nancy Pelosi's interview with the Times, that podcast interview. Did you hear any of it?
No.
Girl. Let me say something about Nancy. Nancy got on those people podcasts for a full hour and denied that this election represented any issues that Democrats have. The entire time. To the point where I was like, is Nancy Pelosi well? Because if my team, and I don't even do sports of any kind besides shopping, but if my team lost every game all season, would I show up to the press conference and say no? I mean, the quarterback is great. No issue with ownership. Stadium is fantastic. Turf is great. Coach is fantastic.
Our prep has been on point.
Things we did that. What, Nancy? Like, this woman asked her the question in so many ways to the point where she was getting downright defensive and kept going back to her ultimate talking point, which is, no, we don't have an issue. And she finally conceded, well, maybe there is an issue with marketing. And that what we could have done better is messaged what Biden did accomplish in his presidency. And she also said that she feels like not having a, what do you call it, friend? A primary negatively impacted Kamala.
Correct, because Biden shouldn't have run, but okay, like that part. But I think there's something that there's seeds of opportunity or curiosity, I don't know exactly what it is, around this very real idea and like actuality that men of all ilks, of all races, of all ethnicities voted predominantly for Trump. And so there's something there. It's not, if you identify as a woman, it is not hard to see what that is, right? People want to pretend like they're rich. They want to be a baller. They want to be able to treat people badly. They want to be able to fire him, hire him.
You're fired.
You're fired. You're an idiot. You get me a piece of chocolate cake like Diddy did. Like, people want to have that power, and they see that.
Yeah.
A woman is never going to be that.
Yeah. Never. A woman of any race is never going to be that. And
no, like it would never work.
It's not how the patriarchy is designed, right? There is.
And so maybe this is me being fatalistic, so I really want you to push back on me. But okay, maybe the strategy is just like, that's not going to happen. And we can dissect why that's not going to happen. But if we want to win, I don't know, I'm not a political pundit, but like, it's just very clear that even Dems and left-leaning folks in purple places or red places are just not going to vote for a woman, and certainly not a woman of color.
And Kim says, and if a woman is like that, then people will call her so many words. And we kind of talked about that, about how Kamala had a reputation on the Hill of being difficult to work with and not being able to keep her staff, blah, blah, blah. And you were the one who said, so what? If she was a man.
You think Donald Trump can keep his staff? How many people did he go through?
Exactly. So now's the time, just very quickly, you all, everyone who is here, who's part of our community, thank you. And you all know how we can have a difference of opinions and still keep it respectful in the chat. If you cannot keep it respectful, now is your time to leave. If not, you will be removed. Thank you for joining the discussion. Yeah, so I think what I hear you saying when you talk about, well, a woman is never going to be that, is why it is so important. And I was thinking about this, having a conversation with myself about this earlier, is that this is where people who are progressive leaning have to hold ourselves accountable for a lack of political education and building awareness in our very own communities. Because there is something about systemic oppression that people are just not understanding nor seeing themselves as being a part of. People do not feel that they are part of an oppressed or marginalized group. And I get it, because why the fuck would you? Who wants to carry that banner? It is so much easier to shepherd the so-called American dream, to believe in the myth of meritocracy. So to believe in misogynoir, to believe in sexism, to believe in the patriarchy, to believe in transphobia, why would I adopt a paradigm that puts me at a deficit, even though everything else in the world substantiates that viewpoint? And so what we have to do a better job of is making the reality plain to people. And this election has taught me how much we have failed.
And how to have that conversation from a place of abundance versus scarcity. Like, this is where we are, and this is where we can go, but how do we get there? And it's not going to be necessarily the way we want to get there. Because I imagine, and I know, that the Republicans didn't want to get here through Donald Trump. Period. But there they are.
Period. So we had an episode about mis and disinformation. Can you talk, friend, about what role you think that played this time around?
I mean, I think it played a huge role. And I think what is very scary to me is we are all operating with our own bubbles of information.
Yeah.
And that messaging is different, right? For everyone. And so not that we want it all to be a monolith, right? We don't want that. We want to understand the different viewpoints, but I think people get like really stuck. So let me use an example.
Okay.
In the wellness community, which I'm like adjacently, I don't even say I'm in, but I'm in school. People really like Robert Kennedy because he's an environmentalist, because he talks about the soil, because he talks about water, because he talks about
vaccines.
Well, I'm putting a pin in the vaccine thing, but I'm telling what the things that people focus on.
Okay.
Saunas and ice baths and getting sunlight and all the things that are food sources, red dye. People focus a lot on red dye because red dye has a link to cancer. That's true. In Europe, you can't have red dye. In the US, you can have it in food. That's true. Am I still on?
Okay, you kind of went out for a second. Now, okay, you're coming back in. You said, can you repeat the red dye part from?
Right. So in Europe, red dye is not allowed in any food products. In the United States, it is.
Okay.
There is a link between red dye and cancer. That is true. And so I use this as an example. People dug into that. And they're like, well, Trump is going to appoint Robert Kennedy. And so either I'm not going to vote or I'm going to vote with Trump. But like, Robert Kennedy is an unwell person.
Period.
Who doesn't believe in the efficacy of vaccines. If anyone has read anything about Robert Kennedy, no one would trust them taking out their trash. He like killed a bear, he killed a whale.
What?
He like made lists of all these women he slept with. He was abusive. I mean, like, his ex-wife died. Like, there's so much about Robert Kennedy that should make all of us very worried. But people don't know that because that isn't part of the social media loop.
I see what you're saying.
So if you've been sick and been healed through alternative ways, which a lot of us have, in part, that's where you're voting from. I'm just using that as one example.
For sure.
I think Jill Stein is another one around Gaza. Like, people voted for Jill Stein because they thought that she was a better vote for Gaza.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I do want to say, and I know we can, and Lux on the bus, hey friend, mentioned this, that I know that we can pick apart the results a million times until Sunday, right? A bit of this is Monday morning quarterbacking. And the reality is that the only booth I was in was mine. So I am speculating at best. I am reacting to data at best, but I don't know for certain anything that we're talking about today to be absolutely fundamentally true. But I think if we don't take a moment to truly think critically about these issues, then again, it is not being strategic in our movement. We have to recognize where we have failed so that we can move forward. So, to your point about people only seeing particular messaging on their timeline, friend, you know how I feel about the ways in which progressives, and I'm talking about from moderate Democrats all the way to the left of the left, revolutionaries, burn it down, have not been strategic about the use of online media. I think we are getting our ass mollywopped right now by the right and also by Russia. Let's just keep it a stack. I do not think we are moving with strategy. I don't think we have enough progressive platforms that are well funded. I do not think that we have a universal rallying cry. We cannot agree on 5 talking points. They know guns, God, and gays. They know that. What are the 3 rallying cries for progressives? I want a quick bore. What is
I want to go down to the clinic and just get a little bore.
Get a little bore at the clinic today. Yeah.
You know what I want to do? I want to go septic.
In my polycule with my trans lover.
With my kid peeing in the kitty box at
of his elementary school with the furry costume on. I can't wait for that. There's no talking points. And so it is, listen, my sister don't read the New York Times. Lies are free. The truth is behind a paywall. And
the truth is behind a paywall. Never a truer statement. People can only pay attention for 20 seconds at a time.
So I just don't, of course, disinformation and misinformation is real and is being used against us because we do not have a viable and valuable counter. There's no comm strategy. And if you're part of an old guard Black nationalist community, they're, like where I came from in my orientation, they don't believe in an iPhone because they're afraid that it's a listening device. And to some degree, yeah, damn right it is. But what are we going to do next? We're not reaching people.
So there's also the reality that we're not also educating people well. So TA said this too, and I've been thinking a lot about this. I feel that we have failed our children in terms of knowing the history of this country. When we say we're not going back, we have to illustrate what we're not going to in history.
Talk about this. Talk about this. So William Barber, the Reverend William Barber, who has been organizing, first his campaign that I knew of was called The Rent Too Damn High. And so his whole movement started, I think, in North Carolina around poor and working class people. And I saw him on Democracy Now! Last week, friend, and he talked about, I think Nicole Hannah-Jones actually brought this point up, but about how it took 60 years from the United States' first effort around Reconstruction to go from like electing Black public officials and kind of having these conversations around truth and reconciliation and how we move forward beyond slavery to just kind of pivoting right back to white supremacy in a real way. Openly, right? Black codes, laws around people loitering, segregation, racial apartheid, all those things were codified. And it was to the direct opposite of what Reconstruction had envisioned. Today, if we think about the Voting Rights Act and all of these civil rights gains, we're about 60 years out as well to now having a Trump presidency. So understanding history is really important because it is the same liberation struggle, I would argue.
And I think there's also this conversation where you are the expert more than anyone, is people not understanding history. How do we get people to understand history? And it's not through, obviously it's through education, but like, it's also not just that.
Yeah.
So someone said something here that I want to just highlight and talk about, because you mentioned it a few times and I agree with you, but I don't like it. I mean, I agree and I don't like it. Glossy Diva 76 says, I don't like the narrative that Democrats are liberals or elitist and the rest are uneducated. I don't like it either.
You mean the rest as far as like Trump supporters are uneducated? Yeah.
Or people who don't vote or vote third party or.
I see. Yeah, I agree with that. I think my point and the point of some people who I agree with, like Bernie Sanders, Ralph Nader, William Barber, and more, what they've been getting at is not that Democrats factually are that way, but they are being perceived in that way. And that is a narrative issue. It's also a real issue that people who are making below a certain amount, who are seen as working poor in this country, are still by huge numbers voting for Donald Trump. That is a concern. So there's something about the Democratic Party that they are not seeing their reflection in. And I think we have to figure out how to organize around that. The movement is failing, for sure. Yeah. And as you've said before, friend, the war has not helped. I saw a title, I have not read it, but back to the New York Times and Democratic elitists. I saw an article in the Times this morning that said, when did Democrats become the party of war? And if you think about it, like post-Vietnam, did we think that we would get here? And I think it means something that Kamala could not articulate because of, her not trying to separate herself from Biden too far, what it was going to look like for her to take a strong position on Palestine. She was unwilling to, she was unable to. Democrats have been seen as bedfellows of Netanyahu in the same way that the Republicans have been seen. And that is real. And when people get online and say things like the two parties are the same, you and I know that there's a lot more nuance to that. You and I know that that's not true. But how can you disagree when we don't have a Democratic Party who is doing the real work to distance themselves and to make some initiatives and gains and policy changes and shifts plain for everyone to understand?
And you've made this point before, and I agree, right? That like we might not actually, the Dems might not actually be the party of elites, but we are. Like if you think of people in power and even Kamala Harris, like you've said it here, Black elitism doesn't save us.
At all.
Right? Or Black excellence doesn't save us, right? Exactly. Which is akin to elitism in this case. And if you think about many of the people in high elected positions in this country, whether they're the Democrats, most of them went to Harvard. That's elitism.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, where did
AOC was a waitress, but she went to BU. She has a 4-year degree. Like she spent a lot of money on her college. That's still something that most people don't have access to.
Where did Barack and Michelle meet each other? Was it Princeton?
No, it was at their law firm.
Oh.
She was his supervisor during his summer associate at a big fancy law firm.
Wow. Yeah. Work to do indeed. You all please keep sounding off in the chat. I think the biggest question now for me, friend, is what's next? Like, let's break this into two kind of buckets. One is, what do you see as the most immediate policy changes that may occur? And two, what's next as far as our movement is concerned?
Policy changes that Trump is going to enact?
Yeah.
Oh, I think he's going to immediately pardon all the January 6 rioters. I think he'll pardon himself in whatever capacity he wants to. I think he'll focus on immigration and enforcement. And then I think tariffs. What about you?
Yeah. Mass deportations are coming. I think it's really important, and people have to remember that while Trump may not, take on certain issues from the executive branch, what the presidency does is it gives people certain political cover on the state and local level. So I think blowbacks around LGBTQ plus issues, for sure, more of those are coming, as well as a continued erosion on reproductive rights.
I think there's going to be a real focus on like rollback of policies that protect trans individuals. I mean, sorry, can I just share one quick story?
Please.
One of my best friends from college is a track and cross country coach, and she has a trans child on her cross country team. And she was saying that this past weekend might be their last race. And so kind of obviously we know this, like this is the point.
This is the point. Monica says he is definitely pulling funding from gender affirming healthcare and protections. I have a trans brother who benefits from those things. And so he's actively looking for him and his friends a state that they can go that possibly has funding and supports on the state level, because federally it's gone. And I do think that it means something for it to be on the backs of trans people right now, friend, because what it also demonstrates is a fissure within the movement of queer people, right? And this has been said from the beginning by people like Marsha P. Johnson, which is that although much of our movement and the Stonewall riots started because of trans women and Black and POC trans women at that, quickly they got left behind in the movement, and the movement just became around marriage rights. That's what was being funded, right? And once that was gained, there was not a continued rallying cry around equity for everyone, liberation for everyone, especially when it comes down to trans people. Despite the fact that around the country, if you are a trans person of color, that your entire existence is incredibly precarious. And it is a pillar, as Monica has said, of the Republican strategy. It's a fear-mongering.
And based in fear.
Fear-mongering. Absolutely. And so, when I say LGBTQ issues, thank you, friend, and thank you, Monica, for calling that out more specifically. It's transphobia. That is.
Yeah, because it's not white gay men.
This is what I'm saying.
It's not white lesbians.
What's the old boy name? The one who we talked about a whole bunch of times, You talk about white gay men who was a huge Trump supporter who had all the corruption charges. Santos. Yeah. So it's not him.
Yeah. No.
Mm-mm.
So, the other thing I think, I don't know how it's going to play out, but there will be an even greater division among states.
Okay.
And what people like, I think there'll be like political migration for safety.
Okay.
I don't know what that's going to look like, right? Because a lot of the states that are safer are also too expensive for most people to live in. So I don't know what we're going to do about that. And then down the line, I think that was the second part of your question.
Mm-hmm.
This is dark.
Go ahead.
I don't know how we can be a unified country.
Yeah.
Because I don't know. So there are all these things that make people are put in, we've talked about this, put into buckets based on race, gender, sexual orientation, religion, geography, socioeconomic status, right? And I think we are growing farther and farther, and we joke about it in some ways on the podcast.
Yeah.
But if 53% or 52% of white women voted for Donald Trump, how are people having conversations with them that even land?
And how are people feeling safe?
And how are people feeling safe? So I don't.
Yeah.
Are we breaking off?
Right. I mean, there have been separatist movements in the past, but I think that we were never unified. And if we were unified. I think the biggest unifier on this colonized land of these here United States of America has been hatred. I think generation after generation, what has
Isn't that
remained
the
true.
saddest unifying movement
Yeah,
we could?
that's what it is. It has been a consistent us versus them narrative. Every generation, there is some contingent that is able to organize around that. Now, whether that is the loudest voice or not, I don't know, but it has always been there. And some of that, I think, is part of the human frailty of being afraid of being left behind,
Yeah.
of a scarcity mindset.
Yeah. So I had this weird experience. It was interesting. I went on Saturday with my eldest daughter to one of my best friends from college's daughter's school's football game.
Okay.
And it was the morning and still in this daze, right? And all these young people were drunk and rally rousing and my daughter was kind of observing all of this, very white, very tailgating and she was asking me all these questions about it. And I was like, I don't know, honey, this isn't my America. I didn't have this experience. I don't know why people spend $10,000 for a parking spot at a college football game. That doesn't make sense to me. And again, this is a silly example, but just this idea of football's American. But I don't know, not for all of us.
Mm-hmm. There are particular dog whistles and unifiers, and I think those of us who are able to better assimilate into those unifiers are the ones who feel that we have better chances of succeeding. And so it goes back to an us versus them message. Hold up. I think Roger's going through some of the comments that are here. Social media exacerbates this. We now have access to other people's lives and can see what we are not getting. It creates jealousy and resentment. Yeah. Yeah.
Also, I think the myth of social media, people are living for social media. So people, right? So getting the right shot or getting the right photos at a party, it could still be in a strip mall, but
Girl, the gag is nobody was at the party. Y'all just paid $500 for a backdrop. Oh God. Okay, people are definitely judging their situation based on a small handful of people they see doing well online.
But they're not doing well online. This is the gag, everyone. This is the gag. That they might have the bag, Sure, but they might be in debt because of the bag. I'm not judging the purchase of the bag, but like they might have the backdrop, but they might not have a safe place to live.
I literally just told my fiance this last night. I was kind of in a space of randomly processing some previous trauma in my time in a high control group. And I was like laying out all of these examples of how my abusive ex in this group really took me through some horrific situations, just like, dinner chatter, Margo. And and I
I'm
said
here for it.
yeah. So, and I said to myself, this is so interesting because there is something about my life that people will probably think, oh, it's so perfect. It's so fun. She's always traveling. But you wouldn't trade a position with me if you knew what I had been through to get to this point. And I think the media does such a good job on the Republican side, especially of manipulating narratives in this way. This idea that Donald Trump is this extremely wealthy business tycoon, this mogul with all this money, so astute and going to be great for the American economy. Go, man, go, rah.
So Montgomery Lamar said something so like I haven't been able to say it, and thank you for saying it. Nope, not that one, Roger. Social media is simultaneously the problem and the solution.
Preach this.
So what do we do with that?
I think that's what we have to organize around.
And how are we intentional about it in our lives?
Mm-hmm. I think that's what we have to organize around and we have to get clear about. And I think it starts on a micro level. It starts on a grassroots level. I thought so much, and this was particularly on the left, a lot of the very loud voices in this echo chamber that I'm in, and they were making certain calls around Gaza. Rightfully so. I don't take umbrage with those calls. But what I thought was, do you know your neighbor's name? When was the last time you called your grandma? Does your sister have childcare, after school care? What is happening in our very own communities that we also need to hold fundamental space for? What does mutual aid look like right now? And what tools do we have at our disposal, like social media, to amplify that message? Other things that I think I take from this time as far as moving forward, Margo, is that Black women are tired. And I think we've been tired, but I think showing up to the polls this time around and seeing a Donald Trump 2.0, I have felt a different level of, I don't use the word defeat, but it is a different level of trauma and pain than in 2016. I woke up that day and thought, well, this must be a fluke. This time, however, what I understand very clearly and truly is that, oh no, the majority of Americans are telling us how they feel unapologetically.
So we've got to wrap up soon, but one of my friends said something. It's to this point, Tashira, that there's two things that have given me like little glimmers of hope,
Sure.
or like reality. And the US Monday is not different fundamentally than it was on Thursday.
Very true.
We just now know that people are this racist, this misogynistic, this self-interested, this committed to white supremacy and the patriarchy, this deeply hating of women and their safety and their autonomy and their ability to make decisions about their healthcare. We just know. So maybe it's not good, but we can just be open about it.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that, friend, because it's no denying it. And I think it becomes harder and harder to deny. The rose tinted glasses, with the cool mom sweatshirt and the Ugg boots and the Lululemon joggers to get your PSL. where you're thinking,
which I never did.
I know you never did that, friend. I was actually most likely to do it than you. I think that kind of suburban life that makes you feel that you are exempt from either having to organize or exempt from a particular type of marginalization and oppression, you can't continue to argue that that is the truth. Not with election results like this, because what you and I talked about, and yes, you all, there will be a part 2, is by how wide the margins were. It was not a close race, no matter what Nancy Pelosi might want us to believe.
It wasn't close. It wasn't close, you guys.
It was not close. So we thank you all for joining us. I do want to talk a bit more in part 2 about organizing intra-communally. I think this is a time to build caucuses for sure. There's nothing wrong with white women organizing among white women. Latinx people doing the same, Black folks doing the same. We have an issue with our men, our cisgender men, that needs to be addressed. So I want to get more into that next time. In the meantime, if you are in the Boston area, please join us for our supper club, right, Em? It's going to be on Thursday.
A pocket of joy, a moment to talk in community. It's going to be amazing. And we're so thrilled to be partnering with some really incredible small businesses, Bow Market, which is one that we've done before, but a local chef, local musician, some bakers, healers, some breath work. It's going to be a writer. It's going to be good.
It's going to be really good, and the food's going to be amazing. So yes, Trina's coming. I was about to ask if you were coming. So we are so excited to be in community with you in real life. That's
yay!
That's what we need right now. So this will be saved. Let us know in the comments if we missed you, specifically your thoughts on the next conversation. And we will see you good people next time. Bye, everyone. Thank you so much for joining.